To prep your files to become screen positives, there's a few things you have to do. So let's say this is my design and I want this to be kind of open, so the shirt would be everything you see that's white. So kind of like cutting this out. Now, the best thing to do would be to take my text, create outlines, and then cut it away from the purple square. So I'm going to get my Pathfinder and do a minus front. So now, let's see if it worked. I'll put another one back there. Let's change the color. So you can see it's cut out from there. And that makes it easier for the printing if we were just doing one color. The next thing you have to do is make sure that this is black. So a lot of times we're designing in the color we want to use for the ink later, but we want it to just be black to make the positive, to expose our screen. So the next thing you have to think about is the size. So if you want it to be kind of as big as possible, you have to make it the size you want it to actually be on your shirt here. So I'm going to switch this orientation so that I can make it fit the entire paper. So usually we do 8.5 by 11. If you want it to be bigger than that, we'd have to go up to the 11 by 17 paper, which is doable, but usually shirt designs aren't really that big. But you can you have to think 100% size-wise. So the best recommendation I can make is to get out a t-shirt and measure what size you want something to be. So however you want it to be on the shirt, you have to put it on here. If you were doing like a pocket design where it's that like smaller one just on kind of the chest, on the side of the chest, you'd have to actually measure how big you want. So it's usually like 4 inches or something. And so then you would make it exactly that here and lay it out on the paper in the size and in the placement that you want it. So usually they have it on the left side of your chest, like where your heart is. And so it would be on the right side of the paper because of how it goes on to the shirt, if that makes sense. So imagine holding the paper up in front of the shirt, and where you would want it, that's where it needs to be on the paper. But if we were going to go as big as we could, I would size it here as big as I could. And if it's one color, this is basically all you have to do. Save it as a PDF and turn it in, and then Miss T will print it in her office. If you're going to do 2 colors, that's a little bit different, and we'll do that now. Okay, so if you wanted to do a 2-color design, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but what I found is easiest for how we're going right now is the way I'm going to show you. So let's say this is our design. We've got our 2 colors. We've got black and this blue, right? That's what I'm intending for the ink. Just remember, it doesn't really matter what color things are here because you're picking ink out of a jar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some registration marks. And registration marks are typically little plus signs or crosshairs. It would help if I put on a stroke so you could see it. And they're usually just these little guys like this. I'm going to grab both of them and align them to each other so they're perfectly centered. And group it. I'm going to take one here, and I'm going to also go across here. So when I copy it, if I hold shift, you'll see it doesn't let me get out of a horizontal line. And that's kind of helpful to have these centered with each other. And you can also go here to selection and vertically align them. But you don't want this one to be a little bit off, because that's going to kind of just throw you off for what we're going to be using those little crosshairs for later, which is lining up on our screens and lining up on our platen when we start screen printing. So we want them to be perfectly horizontal with each other. Where they are in the corner doesn't really matter. But then you're going to grab both of them and you're going to change the stroke color to this one, which is called registration. And that gets into pre-press and talking to the computer. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to just have it there, and we've got our design lined up. And then what we're going to do is add an artboard. So now we've got 2 artboards. And again, this is the design I want, but what I'm going to do for today is I'm going to take all of this, copy it onto the second artboard, so it all stays together, nothing is moved, the little registration marks are still in the same place with the design. So you don't want to go like, you don't want to do this part and then this part. You want to do the whole thing onto the second artboard. And then what I'm going to do is going to delete the little teardrop here, and I'm going to delete the text off of this one. So this is one color and this is 2 colors, but they're lining up together. And hopefully that makes sense. So when I print them, if I put those 2 right on top of each other and I line up according to the marks, this teardrop will be where I want it next to the text. Again, there's other ways to do this, but this is how we're going to approach it for now. And then I need to change this into black. Again, it doesn't matter what color it is here because you choose the color off of the shelf with a jar of ink. So the goal here is to have your colors separated on different artboards, but they're going to line up perfectly when we print them. And then save this as a PDF and turn it in on Classroom.